The NFL is descending on Indianapolis, Indiana, Lucas Oil Stadium. It is the 2025 NFL Scouting Combine. We're adjacent to Lucas Oil Stadium in the Convention Center for a special NFL Scouting Combine edition of Sports4CLE. Welcome, everybody. Andrew Berry met with the media today, and as you might guess, hot topic of discussion, Myles Garrett. Berry reiterated that he has no intention of moving Myles Garrett by trade.
You guys have all heard me say he's a huge part of our organization, really good person. He's an awesome player. Understand the trade requests and everything, but our stance really has not changed. We can't imagine a situation where not having Myles as a part of the organization is best for the Browns. So I just want to hit that off the top, and with that, I'll open up for questions.
How did you feel when he expressed no confidence in you producing a winner?
Yeah, Tony, I think if you by that you mean the trade requests, I think trade requests, they happen across the league all the time. And I think, at times for individual players that they'll have certain interests during different parts of their career, whether they're a young player, a veteran player, things like that. That's not unusual. It's not the first for us. It probably won't be the last. It's not the first across the league. But we appreciate Myles, and like I said, we're not interested in moving him.
But he said your vision doesn't align with his and being a winning team.
Yeah, so I didn't see maybe that specific thing, Tony, but like I said, we've had plenty of dialogue with Myles, really since he's been a Brown, and certainly after the season with him in his camp. Certainly understand his frustration from last year. We're all frustrated, but our focus is on obviously making the changes and the pieces to make sure that we don't feel like we did at the end of last season.
So along those lines, he seems like he's kind of drawn a line in the sand a little bit on he definitely wants out. But do you feel confident there's like a path forward where you guys can be simpatico and get back on the same page?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, understand the frustration. We've had plenty of dialogue, but ultimately my responsibility is to make the decisions that are best for the Browns, and having Myles a part of the organization is a huge piece of that.
So Myles Garrett still does have 2 years remaining on his contract. Berry remains adamant Brown's not interested in trading him. So the question becomes, does Andrew Berry and the Browns try to extend Myles Garrett?
Probably seen over the past 5 years, whenever you get into extension talks, they can happen at any time. And I've learned not to predict those, because oftentimes those negotiations, they can go up and down and back and forth. I think if you look at our history through 2020, we've had some that have occurred in March or April, some that have occurred in June and July, some that have occurred in season, and some who have occurred as late as December. So I can't begin to predict. But we really do take the approach with our cash and cap planning. We take a multi-year time horizon and to accommodate the flexibility that we need.
So the Browns' position relative to trading Myles Garrett hasn't changed, doesn't sound like it's going to change. Andrew Berry was also asked about Deshaun Watson re-injuring that Achilles that he tore just about a month after he had the first surgery.
Obviously, Deshaun, he re-injured his Achilles. Unfortunately, he turned his foot ankle area that caused the re-tear during the normal stages of, the recovery process. I know there's been a lot of speculation and everything out there, but, there's nothing nefarious. It's just an unfortunate accident. So our focus is on making sure that he gets healthy and can be back to normal.
Do you have any further clear idea of the timetable? I know that 14 days
Yeah, it's probably too early to pin that down with certainty. He will miss significant time. How far that spans into 2025, I can't give you a specific right now. He's shown to be a fast healer, and we're going to try and be as thoughtful and aggressive with the recovery process. But that's not something that I could predict at the current moment.
So the Browns thought they had the quarterback position solved with Deshaun Watson. They're once again looking for a quarterback. Andrew Berry was asked today, why is it so difficult to find an NFL quarterback? And also, will you have the cap space for the Browns that you need to improve the roster?
How does this? Our cash and cap position, like I mentioned, we always look at that on a multi-year planning perspective. it will not be prohibitive for us to do things if the opportunities present themselves. I think it's hard because quarterback is the most impactful position, but it's also one of the most interconnected positions in the sport. Look, talk about decision making. It's a position where you're going to make 50 to 60 decisions a game and probably have the ball in your hand for 35 or 40. But at the same time, all 10 people around you have to be able to do their jobs. And really, I would say this, 10 people on the field, but it's also the people on the sideline in terms of like how you're building the offense or the scheme around the individual. So there are a number of I don't want to use the word complicating factors, but maybe interdependent factors that go into it. So the evaluation process is important, but so is the integration and development process as well.
That leads us to this year's draft relative to quarterbacks. Not an exceptionally deep quarterback draft. There's not that one can't-miss guy at the top of the draft that would be a franchise quarterback for years to come. Andrew Berry was asked about the two top quarterbacks universally in this draft, considered to be Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward.
Both those guys, they're excellent players, they're excellent prospects. We're looking forward to spending more dedicated time with them, not only this week, but moving forward. They're impressive young men, not only on the field, but everything that their programs say about them. So all those decisions remain to be seen, Mary Kay, but it's been a good start with them so far.
Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback from Colorado, Deion Sanders' son, seems to have a way of staying in the news and seems to keep top of mind for the Browns. He's come out and said he only plays Madden with the Browns. Andrew Berry was asked about all the comments Shedeur Sanders has made relative to the Browns and what he thinks of them.
I don't make much of it, Tony, just because it's a long way to go. But I will say this: we got a chance to spend some time with Shedeur at the East-West. We'll get some time to spend with him during the upcoming week. He's a fantastic individual. He's really smart, really driven. Grew up around football and was highly successful. So it's been a pleasure to spend time with him. We're looking forward to spending more over the next several weeks. But there's still a long way to go with everything, and so we'll work through that as appropriate.
Browns are starting to make some roster moves that will create some cap space. They released a long snapper, Charlie Hewitt, was here for a long time. They also released safety Juan Thornhill. Barry talked about the decision to release Juan Thornhill.
Yeah, I think really the big thing with Juan is, first of all, great individual. Thought he played well when he was on the field, but the big thing was just availability. Had been a guy that had been pretty durable during his time in Kansas City, and just had a really tough time, with the calf injuries throughout his time with us. He'll go on and play well and catch on and things like that, but unfortunately, it just didn't work out with us.
Another area that the Browns will definitely be looking to address and upgrade offensive line. DeJuan Jones, when he's been on the field, has shown flashes of potentially being a very good starting caliber NFL tackle. Hasn't finished either of his professional seasons without injury. Barry talked about Jones, who had another minor procedure to clean up the knee injury.
The individual injury itself is, let me knock on wood on this because this went the wrong way for us last year, but the injury individually of itself is not something that is creating a lot of anxiety. But what we do want to focus on is making sure that DeJuan can end the season healthy, because durability it's a huge part of it, and we're a better team when he's on the field and he's healthy. So that's a major focus of his offseason programming.
Andrew Berry also talked a little bit about New England Patriots' new head coach, Mike Vrabel. Vrabel was a Browns consultant a season ago, and when Vrabel was on the podium, remember, Mike Vrabel's Walsh Jesuit graduate. Vrabel was asked about his experience with the Browns last year. Did he ever think it would be a full-time gig, and did they talk to him about a head coaching job? He also was asked what he learned from being with the Browns last season.
No, I didn't want to permanently consult in Cleveland for the rest of my career. Different position? No. Enjoyed my time. I appreciate Jimmy and Dee, entire Haslam family, Andrew and Kevin, and the relationships that I got to make there. It's been fun to see those individuals. I walked into the suite last night in between interviews, and they said, "Oh, get out of here." I said, "I don't work for you guys anymore. You can't tell me what to do." So it was fun just to see them, and but there was no conversation about any long-term plans there. I would have, listened because I didn't have a job at the time.
What did you maybe learn from that experience in Cleveland that helped contribute to you as a coach?
Just how critical, just the little things, right? Just the staff and being mindful of when new coaches come onto the staff. And I know that Kevin was conscious of that. I think that's why I love the idea of having me work with the offense. It's something that I've thought was very beneficial to those coaches, to me, to have conversations. The way that some offensive coaches see things and the way that defensive coaches may see them a little differently. And so have been able to do that in New England and moved Ben over to defense to help Terrell and that staff just look at it from an offensive perspective and things that we can make sure that we're taken care of and not letting slip.
Andrew Berry said Mike Vrabel was just a football coach and he could coach any position, that New England is getting a good one. We are just getting started here on a Sports4CLE special edition from the NFL Scouting Combine, Indianapolis, Indiana. Straight ahead, Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter from cleveland.com. We'll also hear from Tony Grossi. Andrew Siciliano, the Browns' new play-by-play voice, will be in his second year. He'll join us. And Trevor Sikkema from PFF, talking draft, talking Browns. It's a special edition of Sports4CLE from the NFL Scouting Combine. Stay with us.
The new Monopoly Bonus Spectacular family of scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery, you can uncover a spectacular amount of winnings. With 5 games from $1 to 20, multipliers from 5 times to 100 times, over $113 million in total cash prizes and chance bonuses. What you find under a greenhouse could change everything.
Special edition of Sports4CLE from the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, Indiana continues, and we are on Radio Row. Pleased to be joined by Dan Labbe, who is the Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Dan, appreciate the time. I know you're working on a story for this, but quarterback, what's going on? Give us some thoughts here.
Well, today was a busy quarterback day because he had a bunch of guys who are in the mix, right? Terry Fontenot, the GM for the Falcons, talked about Kirk Cousins. It sounds like they're going to pay that bonus, and he might not hit free. They might not cut him. They might wait for somebody to come trade him, or maybe they're actually going to hang on to him. Omar Khan from the Steelers is making decisions on Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. So the veteran quarterback market is going to heat up here soon. And then, of course, there's these 2 guys at the top of this draft that the Browns have an opportunity to maybe get. They're going to get to spend some time with those guys, get to know those guys. Probably not going to get to watch them work out, but that's all right. Get the medicals, all of that stuff. And then eventually, it feels like it's years away, but it's getting closer. It's going to be decision time.
And it's just been interesting. I don't really have a feel. Do you get a feel at all if they're locked into a quarterback at this point?
I don't. But I'm also in that mode of you don't believe anything that you hear at this point, right? Yep. I mean, I think it was last week Todd McShay came out and said they aren't going to take a quarterback. Then you have Adam Schefter today saying, well, they make sense for them to take a quarterback. So there's going to be a million smoke screens out there. I still sort of feel like, again, if they really like both of these guys or one of these 2 guys and they end up in an opportunity to take them, I think they'll understand that. And I think they will take either Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. I don't know who. I don't know if they're in love with either of these guys. But if you're sitting there at number 2 and you need a young quarterback, it just makes sense to do it.
Can you see them taking a quarterback early and late? I mean, the room's probably going to be completely redone. DTR might be back.
I would consider it, because you have so many picks. And
when you think about like 4th-round picks, 5th-round picks, 6th-round picks, I mean, they took Nathaniel Watson, I think, in the 6th round last year. I don't know how many Browns fans even know who Nathaniel Watson is after he was actually on the roster for a year. So if you use that on a second quarterback, maybe a guy that offers a different skill set, maybe a guy that you can put in uniform on game day, you can come in and run around a little, do something different for a series or two, I'd be open to that. I think this team should try anything and everything at that position.
And the guy we were talking about, Kirk Cousins, was a second pick in a draft of Washington. It was RG3, Robert Griffin III, and then Kirk Cousins like the 4th round. So there's precedence. How much did the quarterback play, which was historically bad, skew everybody's view of this roster, do you think?
I think it was enormous. Now, are we talking 5 wins, 6 wins? I don't know about that, but I've often thought that 11-6 a couple years ago was probably an outlier. I think 3-14 was probably an outlier. I think the truth is probably more somewhere in the middle with all of this, and I think the fact that you get to Jameis Winston, right, and he's turning the ball over all the time. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I think it's safe to say that he's probably not a quarterback in this league and definitely not a starter. And, of course, Deshaun Watson, getting you off to that 1-6 start, playing some of the worst quarterback in the league. It's impossible to judge what this offense could have been. I don't know that this would have been a playoff team, but I don't think they were actually a 3-win team either.
Yeah, so that kind of makes it more difficult if you're Andrew Berry. Now, what do you think needs to be upgraded? Quarterback's the obvious one. I don't think anybody who follows the Browns would argue that they need to upgrade the quarterback position. What else needs to be upgraded?
We could spend the whole show probably talking about this. Not a lot of people are talking about receiver.
Yeah.
We were talking about running back before we came on the air here. I think that's one. But receiver is really interesting because you have Jerry Jeudy, who had that breakout year last year. Can you repeat that? I don't know, but let's find out. And then after that, Elijah Moore's a free agent. Cedric Tillman showed some flashes, but he also missed the last 6 games with a concussion. You didn't get anything out of Jamari Thrash last year, one of your draft picks. I think wide receiver on day 2, that's one of the positions I'm kind of circling, or even maybe at 33. If Matthew Golden from Texas is sitting there at the start of day 2, I would think about turning in that card. As much as I'd love an edge rusher there, I would think about turning in that card for a guy like that. I think you need a dynamic receiver still to pair with Jerry Jeudy.
Well, we heard earlier in the show Andrew Berry from the podium saying he kind of views Travis Hunter as a wide receiver. Yeah. I found that interesting.
Yeah, right, that would be one of the guys they would go with at number 2. And if you go with a more veteran guy who's maybe not, let's say, just throw out like a Sam Darnold. I don't know if that would be an option or not, but a guy that you have to surround with weapons to make successful. And that's who a lot of these veteran guys are going to be anyway, and even a rookie. Travis Hunter is really interesting as a wide receiver. I'm surprised Andrew said that because I would think the easiest path forward, make him a cornerback. Corner is an elite position. You've got to have lots of corners. You can never have enough. And then you run him out there for 15, 20 plays on offense. It feels like that would be easier than doing it the other way around. I was surprised Andrew said, no, he's a wide receiver, even though he's going to be working out at cornerback this week.
The thing that I think is really interesting, they really need a running back. And he said Nick Chubb's going to test free agency earlier today. So I would imagine there's 1, maybe even 2 draft picks because this is such a deep running back draft.
Yeah, I mean this is a great draft to need wide receivers, to need edge rushers, to need running backs. So
they need them all.
Yeah, exactly. So they're going to be able to find those guys, and there's so many different ways to do it, right? We saw Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry sign as big free agent signings, and then we see Bucky Irving come out of nowhere with Tampa have a big year. So there's a ton of different ways to solve that position. And again, if you run out of day 2 picks, there's going to be somebody really good there at the beginning of day 3 that you can get. So I think they can kind of just go through and knock off each of these needs as they go through those first. They have like 5 picks in the first 101, I think it is. So they have a real opportunity to just kind of check all of these boxes as they go along.
So the other thing is that it appears that they're going back to the quote-unquote Kevin Stefanski scheme of offense. Will that help I guess a better way to ask this question, was the poor play of the offensive line, which struggled, was it because they were asking them to do different things in the scheme? Was it because they were injured? Was it because they got old?
Is saying all of the above a cop-out? I mean, look, your tackle situation was a mess coming into the year. Andrew Berry has sort of admitted that he misjudged those guys' health coming back, so that didn't help. Jed Wills never turned into what they hoped he would be. Jack Conklin was good, but I mean, look, guys got older. I think they really missed Bill Callahan, too. I mean, there's a reason that they've fired the offensive line coach and went in a different direction. I think they really missed Bill Callahan and kind of his ability to just plug and play whoever he could in there. So I think that was a big part of it. And as far as Kevin Stefanski goes in that scheme, it's kind of coach what you know. I mean, I think there'll be adjustments. I think that it won't be necessarily what it was exactly in 2020 and 2021, but do what you know. You know you're good at it, so let's run that out there and see what happens again.
Well, and to your point, it's probably not a coincidence that it was a Bill Callahan recommendation who coached with Callahan that they hired as their offensive line coach.
Yeah, exactly. Mike Bloomgren. I got to say it out loud so I don't say Mike Holmgren by accident. Mike Bloomgren. I got to get used to it. But yeah, I mean, the fact that look, we heard from Mike Vrabel in the open there. Mike Vrabel was working with the offensive line. He was kind of the de facto offensive line coach. So things were bad there. And so now they have a new guy in there. I think they have 2 assistant offensive line coaches now. So they're investing in getting back to having, I think, a mauling, kind of grinding offensive line.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. And now they're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll turn our attention to the defense. It is a special edition of Sports4CLE from the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, Indiana. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
This special edition of Sports4CLE from the NFL Scouting Combine, Indianapolis, Indiana continues. We are on Radio Row in the Indianapolis Convention Center. The prospects will head to Lucas Oil Stadium to do the Underwear Olympics here in a day or so, along with Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. I'm Dave Bacon. And Dan, defense. We've heard about the Myles Garrett. Andrew Berry continues to say we're not trading him.
Yeah, and I don't know where this goes, right? I mean, Myles has said he's willing to make this ugly, which that starts to get into missing games. But that's really kind of what it comes down to. So the Browns at some point can say, hey, Myles, here's, let's say, $40 million a year, almost fully guaranteed. Are you sure you still want traded? And then they can say, well, we'll trade you, but we're going to get the best offer. So how do you feel about playing here in Indianapolis? Or how do you feel about going to New England or someplace like that? Those guys aren't contenders either. And then, of course, you get to the season. If Myles does hold out throughout the spring and summer, are you willing to miss football games and cost yourself a whole lot of money and hurt your legacy? So I think Andrew Berry is willing to kind of flex his muscle here, play the cards he has, and just see how far Myles is willing to take this.
Well, and he can't miss an entire season because he's under contract for 2 years. So it's the whole, we were talking about contracts tolling with Deshaun Watson. Contracts still toll with Myles Garrett, so he can't miss. He's under contract for 2 years.
He's under contract for 2 years. The Browns have the franchise tag. Like, they've got control of this situation. And again, that's why it's just so hard for me to see them. If Andrew Berry is really digging in his heels, if this isn't just smoke screen, I'm trying to get some outrageous offer for Myles, it's hard for me to see how Myles wins this unless he goes someplace that isn't a better situation than the Browns. It's either similar or maybe worse.
So the other thing is, we still haven't heard a whole lot about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and that's concerning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and going back to even the end-of-season pressers during the season, they just would not answer questions about him. And today, Andrew again was asked about him, and it's disappointing because Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah had developed into one of those guys. When you talk about the core of this defense, it's Myles, it's Denzel Ward, and then it was JOK. He had really developed into that guy. And for a team that didn't force turnovers this year, he was a guy that had that ability, and they missed him. And now, if he's not going to be on the field next year, I mean, you hope he comes back at some point in his career, because he was turning into the player that Andrew Berry thought he could be.
So when you look at this defense, was the offense's lack of ability to move the ball, did it hurt the defense?
I think it did, yeah, but I also think that just their inability to make game-changing plays. I mean, 4 interceptions. Yeah. I think it was only 12 turnovers total. Grant Delpit and Juan Thornhill, for example, right? They just released they're going to release Juan Thornhill. The last time either of those guys forced a turnover is week 2 in 2023. That's the game Nick Chubb got hurt. So it's just this lack of playmaking. And so like a guy like Delpit, nice player, probably a starter in the league, has a role in this defense, but just not dynamic enough. And that's going back to the Travis Hunter discussion.
Right.
If you add a talent like that, are you sure you don't want to put him at cornerback? Because you need guys that can change games, and you need guys that can make dynamic plays across this defense. And it didn't help, too, that Martin Emerson takes a step back. JOK gets hurt. Those things obviously didn't help. Mike Hall is suspended and then hurt twice. But they need some dynamic playmaking on this defense.
So, deep draft for defensive linemen. Do you expect a couple of them to become Cleveland Browns?
I would hope so, especially, again, on day 2. Unless I mentioned Matthew Golden at receiver at 33, but I would love an edge rusher there. We're going to talk to a few of those guys here over the next few days. There's some really good guys who could be available on day 2. Just go watch that Texas A&M defensive line. Like, they obviously have a guy who's going to be a first-round pick, but they've got a ton of talent elsewhere on that line that's available in this draft. So I think there's some opportunities to add, and again, add one on day 2, add one late on day 3. You've got all these picks. Let's just throw resources at this.
So is your gut feeling that the Browns take a quarterback at 2, because that would eliminate Abdul Carter at 2?
Yeah, I mean, that is my gut feeling. And obviously, to miss out on a talent like Abdul Carter would hurt. But if you believe in a quarterback, you have to take the quarterback. I mean, we've seen it with Myles Garrett. You took him at number 1 in 2017, and he has lived up to the hype. He's panned out. But it hasn't led to winning because they haven't had the quarterback. So if you believe in one of these quarterbacks, you have to take them. I personally think I think they're good enough to merit being taken with that number 2 pick. So that's kind of where I'm leaning.
Yeah, I the more you hear about it, it seems like people were kind of initially going, well, it's not last year's quarterback class, and they've kind of come around to it. Can you see a cornerback getting drafted as well? It seems like Andrew Berry always drafts a corner or 2.
And that's what he's been best at. I mean, he's done a really nice job drafting corner. I know, like we mentioned Martin Emerson, I still think he's got a chance to be really good. Cam Mitchell, I think, has a chance to be good. We didn't see a lot of Myles Harden last year, but that's one area where Andrew Berry has done a pretty good job drafting guys. So I think he understands the value of corner, and again, just throwing resources at. I think defensive line and corner, Andrew just wants to throw resources at those positions.
The other thing that's kind of head-scratching, we talked a little bit about Juan Thornhill. Before that, it was John Johnson III. And those were guys you came in, you're like, okay, he's been pretty good NFL play. And they didn't work out.
Yeah, it's strange because, I mean, look, I'll admit I kind of liked both of those. Mm-hmm. I thought the JJ3 signing was interesting. I thought you bring in a Super Bowl winner from Kansas City, a guy who knows what it takes to win rings, and it just didn't work out. So I don't know if he's just misjudging what he's seeing when he watches these guys. I don't know if it's a scheme fit. I don't know what it is, but it's disappointing that twice now they made pretty big investments there, and it just hasn't worked.
It's kind of interesting. So they hit on a couple of undrafted rookie free agent safeties and a linebacker in Diabate. Do you think they look into the secondary for help? The safety position. I mean, you got rid of Thornhill.
Yeah, that's another one. And again, even with a guy like Delpit, who I like, what is he exactly? I think he's more of a guy with a role, right? A guy who can be a starter in this league, but he's not a game-changing type of player. So yeah, safety. I mean, we can just. I think we've done it through the course of this show. We've just gone through every single. Should we talk long snapper next? They have
Charlie
needs
Hewitt
all
is
over.
gone.
Yeah, they have needs all over the place. But yeah, safety. I would certainly put safety on that list for maybe high day 3, something like that.
if JOK is not back, you got to find somebody that's a playmaker in the middle of the defense.
Right, and that's such an important position, too. We've seen them, they go out and they get Anthony Walker for a couple of years, and they bring in Jordan Hicks, and they really were kind of going to hand the reins to JOK, I think, in that, the guy with the green dot, the leader in that room, and now he's hurt. Jordan Hicks is still around. He's still under contract. He's getting older. He got banged up last year. He was good when he was on the field, but you do need to find some young options there. Diabate's interesting. I thought Devin Bush played well last year. I don't know if those guys aren't necessarily the solution, but I think they can be part of it.
So here's another question then. Which areas do you address in free agency? And Andrew Berry said we'll find a way to get. It's not going to be the top tier guys, but they're gonna bring in some veterans that start.
Yeah, I think linebacker would be a prime spot to address because I think there's always value available at linebacker. Some cheaper guys. It's a position that's sort of weirdly been undervalued, I think, in free agency. So I think that would be a good position. Maybe you make another run at safety, third time's the charm. see if you can get an answer there. And I think wide receiver is an area where I would look now. That's tough in free agency because those guys are so expensive. But again, something Andrew has done well: trades for Amari Cooper, trades for Jerry Jeudy. The Elijah Moore trade didn't work, but he's done pretty well trading for receivers. So that's another area. If you could go add another receiver, I would do that.
Would you expect another offseason trade? He's done it the last couple of years.
He loves it.
And he's got a bunch of fourth, fifth round draft choices, which seems to be the sweet spot.
Yeah, well, and I think that's part of why he likes to collect those picks because he uses them in trades. They're sort of like second round picks in the NBA. You just throw them into trades, and I think he views it. Younger GMs, I think, seem to get influenced a little more by the way business is done in the NBA, and Andrew certainly fits into that mold. And so he loves using those day 3 picks to go get guys, for salary dumps. This is Darius Smith. Dustin Hopkins was a guy that he did that with when he lost a kicking battle. So Andrew's always ready to pounce on those deals.
All right, before I let you go, veteran quarterback, is there one you can see that ends up here? And do you do veteran rookie?
Kirk Cousins seemed like the obvious one. I'm not a big Kirk Cousins guy, but he seemed like the obvious fit with the Kevin Stefanski history. But we'll see, with what Terry Fontenot said today. Again, is it smokescreen? Is it real? Who knows? I would be interested in the Sam Darnold. I don't know how much that's going to cost you, but that's a guy you could bring in and he's replaceable. Justin Fields is a guy you could bring in, and you don't mind if he loses a quarterback battle in camp or you bench him by week 4 or 5. So I think you're looking at guys like that. Again, Darnold, if he's costing you $30 million, you're not going to do that. But I think that's the level of quarterback you're looking at.
Dan Labbe, thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it. Thanks very much, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
Dan Labbe, make sure you check him out. Browns beat reporter for the playing dealer, cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we continue talking Browns. It is a special edition of Sports4CLE from the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, Indiana. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. Special edition of Sports4CLE continues from the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, Indiana, and we're pleased to be joined by longtime Browns beat reporter Tony Grossi, ESPN Cleveland, the land on demand. Tony, appreciate the time. I guess the first question is quarterback. Nothing is exciting, nothing jumps off the page. How do you address it?
Well, they're one of many teams that are trying to answer those questions out here. And, of course, the Browns thought they wouldn't be in this position again for a while. But here we are, number 2 pick. unfortunately for not only them but for Cleveland fans, it's not a great draft for quarterbacks. But I think as we get closer to the draft, that feeling is lessening a little. That there's talent there. There might not be the automatic pick, at number 2 or whatever, but I think the Browns not only have to, but will find their quarterback, at least of the immediate future, in this draft.
Do you think it's at 2? Do you think they find a way at 2, or is it a little bit later?
Yeah, I think the options are open. It depends. If you like Shedeur Sanders and you like Cam Ward, you're going to get one of them, right? It's a no-brainer. If you don't like one of them and he's the guy who's on the board, I think there are options after that, but it's harder to finagle that guy into your midst, rather than at 1 or 2, right? I mean, did they take a quarterback at number 33 or trade up from 33 to get that second wave? So I don't think I've seen a draft for the Browns that had so many options there for them,
I would assume this is a hugely important job for a draft for Andrew Berry relative to his job. 3-14, you don't often survive. They did.
No, it was a great mulligan they were given, and it's the 6th year of his regime. He and Kevin Stefanski, and you could say, well, there are 2 playoff appearances there, but you're in the 6th year and you still haven't gotten higher than second place in your division. So yeah, I guess it's not surprising that they both came back, because they had a really good year the year before. And I think the ownership is still kind of a little traumatized by the early going of their ownership, where there was a new coach and GM every year.
And they should be.
Yeah.
So you look at it. The quarterback play was historically bad, however you want to measure that. Does that make the roster look worse than it is, or is this roster in need of an overhaul? These are tough questions.
It is, and it's going to dictate how long it takes the Browns to compete again. If you overrate your roster, you're just spinning your wheels, right? It's a tough call. It really is, because I think a lot of things went down. They weren't a 3-14. They were at the end. The quarterback. They were. That Baltimore game, the last game of the year, they had 3 guys on the field who hadn't played a down of football all year. They just picked them up during the week. So, I mean, that's the lasting impression everyone has. But when I think back to the beginning of training camp at the Greenbrier, I had high hopes.
Yeah.
As well as they did. But once Watson didn't pan out, everything crashed after that.
And you built the offense to have him succeed. And that how much of that resulted in the offensive line looking like they were a little bit older?
They've answered that question by firing the coordinator and the offensive line coach, right? That was a concession that they tried to fix something that wasn't broke. And they tried to do it for Watson's behalf, and it blew up in their face. So now they're trying to recapture what they had before, which was, a pretty good offense when Joe Flacco was flinging the ball. And the offensive line was really good when Bill Callahan was the coach. So that's the biggest concession they've made in this offseason, that they screwed that up.
Do you think the offense in that, because you had so many 3-and-outs, you didn't have explosive plays, does that make the defense look
Absolutely,
bad?
Absolutely. I think the defense was good enough to be a playoff defense. It wasn't dominating, but it was a good defense. But they're on the field so much that just blows. The same thing happened to the Tennessee Titans. They had a good defensive first half of the year, and it just wore them down. The same thing. So there aren't a lot of, I don't know, I hesitate to say this, but there are fewer problems on defense, obviously, than on offense.
Well, obviously one of the huge concerns is, can Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah come back and play football? And I have no you're closer to it than I am, but when they say he's going for other opinions, that's not what I want to hear.
Maybe we'll get some clarity here about his future. We haven't so far, but you're right. That's a very overlooked omission now on the defense. And they didn't have a lot of great linebackers
Right.
to begin with, you know. And then there's the Myles Garrett question. But other than that, I mean, the defense is repairable,
Right.
you know, in one off season. The offense, I don't think, is repairable in one off season.
When you look at it, quarterback is a glaring need. The other thing that I see, and again, I respect your opinion, I don't see a lot of guys that I want the ball in their hands and that make a defense go, man, that we got to figure out a way to stop this guy.
Right. I mean, Jerry Jeudy
Right.
He convinced me he's a true number one. And Njoku had a terrible year. He's got to be
stay
back.
healthy.
He's got to get back to what he was. He's a playmaking tight end. And now they have to address the running back situation, you know, because even if Nick Chubb comes back, and there's uncertainty about that, he's not the Nick Chubb of old, and probably will never be that player. So I think running back in the draft has become a priority for this team for the first time under the Barry regime.
You know, the other thing that I'm guessing they're probably going to take another receiver, and they've traded for good receivers.
Yeah.
They haven't hit one in the draft yet.
And that's the problem. They should be coming into their own. You know, they got a guy named Michael Woods who they drafted, who should be in his third year and be a player. He's not. Jamari Thrash they drafted last year. They need those young players to ascend. And at that position, it's been one of the blind spots of the Barry regime. You know, you're right. They've traded for some good, but you can't make a living trading for high-priced receivers.
So is there a quarterback that who do you think they have fallen in love with or enamored with? Who do you think who would you is it one and the same?
No, it's not. It never is.
Shocking.
Yeah. I think Cam Ward is by far the best quarterback in the draft. Good enough for me to talk to Tennessee about moving up to get him. Who knows? They may trade down to a team like the Giants who prefer Shadur Sanders, and Cam Ward could be handpicked to them. Still, I am not 100% confident they would take him.
Yeah.
Okay. I do believe they like Jalen Milroe. Okay. Now, not to pick at number 2. But somewhere in their draft, they are fascinated by his skill set, okay? And I know he had a terrible Senior Bowl. I don't think they're unhappy about that because he's kind of drifted back, whereas he could have moved up into the first round. I think that's a long shot now. I'm not saying that's the guy they're going to pick, but my early vibe for a while has been that's a guy they really like and are fascinated with.
I mean, he's extremely athletic. You know, all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
The question is, can you teach him to be an effective
Sure.
NFL quarterback?
Sure.
And I guess you'd gamble on athleticism.
Well, you know, the fact that they have his coordinator from Alabama, now their coordinator, Tommy Rees, whether he has the secret sauce or what, but he produced a great season out of him when Nick Saban was still the coach. Now, when that regime left, Milroe became erratic. So maybe they think they can do it. Again, I'm not saying they're going to pick him, but the one vibe I got early in this process was they do like him. And I'm not sure what they think of Shadur Sanders. They're going to have they better figure out, you know, if they pass him, that he's not going to be a great quarterback because again, there might be only 2 great quarterbacks in this draft, and if he's one of them and you didn't get him, that's a big whiff.
All right, before I let you go, how much work does the line need? And again, they were asking him to do different things last year. And did they get old, or was it just a skill mismatch? I
don't think so. I think it was a system mismatch. And, you know, they, again, conceded that when they hired a new line coach who was recommended by Bill Callahan. He hasn't coached in the NFL in 10 years. He was the head coach at Rice. He hasn't coached offensive line in 5 years, but it's kind of his expertise. Mike Bloomgren is his name. So I think the talent still on offensive line is the best position group on the team. It was just so screwed up last year. Now, they got an uncertainty at left tackle with DeJuan Jones having off-season scope surgery. So it's not a turnkey operation. There's still work to be done there. But I think if Bitonio comes back, which I kind of think he will, Ethan Posick, the center, Wyatt Teller, and Mike Conklin came back last year and showed he's still a great player. So that's the best position group on the team.
And if they play like it, you're not a 3-win team.
Right.
You're probably near 500.
Well, it makes a ton of difference. And to get the running game restored to what it was.
Tony Grossi, appreciate the time. Thanks very much.
Anytime, Dave.
Tony
Thank
Grossi,
you.
longtime Browns beat reporter. Catch him on ESPN Cleveland, also online on the Land on Demand. We're going to step away, take a quick time out. We will continue with Sports4CLE's NFL Combine Special. Stay with us. Full Court Action is a half-hour devoted exclusively to men's and women's basketball from across the Mid-American Conference. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Bacon. Join me at 6:30 Tuesday nights, and we'll meet the coaches and players from the Mid-American Conference who are making an impact in basketball. Full Court Action will spotlight the top plays and performances from all across the Mid-American Conference, with some historical action as well. Catch Full Court Action Tuesday nights at 6:30 on Rock Entertainment Sports Network. Sports4CLE special from the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, Indiana continues. We're pleased to be joined by the play-by-play voice of the Browns, Andrew Siciliano, Browns Radio Network. Appreciate the time. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Happy to be here, back in Indianapolis another year.
So we heard Andrew Berry talk a little bit and was asked about salary cap. That's always the question. Says that he'll have money to do what he needs to do, which I don't ever doubt him when he says that.
Well, I mean, there's a long time between, well, not that long actually, between now and March 10, when the new league year, the negotiations actually can happen. There's a lot of creative accounting that teams can do. I know Juan Thornhill, Charlie Hewlett, those moves were made yesterday. I'm sure there'll be other moves as well, or contract renegotiations, or tinkering with bonuses to try to create some space. AB's pretty good at it. Now, I don't expect them to get to like Commanders level, right. $75 million in cap space. That's not going to happen. But they should have some flexibility.
So you were with NFL Network before and have been around the league a lot. The Myles Garrett trade request, that happens quite often in the NFL.
Yeah, it does. I mean, look, last year in San Francisco, for example, I mean, Brandon Ayuk, I think, requested 3 different trades and then turned down 3 different trades, and all of a sudden he got his contract and he came back. This one's a little bit different because, right. You know, Myles has suggested it's not about the money. I don't necessarily want the new contract here. I just want to go somewhere else. I think the Browns' next move, and this is just me surmising, and AB has intimated this at his end of the season press conference, is you make him an offer and you make him probably the highest paid defensive player in the NFL, and if he wants to turn that down, then this maybe turns into a different conversation. But yeah, today, Andrew Berry held firm. They don't want to trade him. Now, that doesn't mean a trade can't happen, doesn't mean other GMs aren't going to call. That's their job to call, and it's Andrew Berry's job to listen, but they don't want to trade him.
So you were the play-by-play voice. You've been around football for a long time. When I look at the Browns a season ago, I'm surprised they only won 3 games. Is it a function of that was how much the quarterback position struggled and it affected everything else?
I mean, it is the most important position in sports. Not just this sport, it's the most important position in any sport. Now, is it all the quarterback's fault? No. Look, the O-line is banged up. Plenty of pieces on the defense got injured as well. There are a long list of reasons. There is a long list of reasons why they ended up at 3-14. But yeah, better quarterback play changes everything. And I think that's also, you know, what makes the second overall pick potentially exciting is that the last 2 teams to pick a quarterback, or to pick second overall, took a quarterback and made the playoffs that year. Houston 2 years ago and Washington this past season. That doesn't mean you're guaranteed a trip to the playoffs if you take a quarterback. But it at least gives you hope, especially considering this team 16 months ago from the draft, when we get to the draft, 16 months in the rearview mirror, was in the postseason. Now, you're 2 years older, you're a little bit more expensive, you certainly had a lot of injuries last year, but a quarterback and good quarterback play can turn things around quickly.
Offensive line, that was another one. It was a strength, and then it struggled last year. Is it? They were in a different scheme, so they were being asked to do some different things.
That certainly had a lot to do with it.
And they were injured. I mean, are they? And they're older. I mean, you know, offensive linemen don't age gracefully. But was it more scheme related?
I think all of the above, and I'm not ducking the question there.
Yeah.
Certainly some was scheme related, and a lot of it was injury related. And then when you add all of that up and you throw in the bad quarterback play, and you don't necessarily fear, if you're a defense, the passing game, at least the first 2 months of the season, then yeah, that run game's not going to look good, especially without Nick Chubb and with him working back when he got back in week 7. And the offensive line, when a quarterback is holding the ball for a long, long time, is not going to look great. Hopefully Joel Bitonio comes back. Hopefully DeJuan Jones gets healthy. They got to figure out what to do on the right side, obviously with Jack Conklin, and they have to figure out whether or not, if Jed Wills moves on, which we assume he's going to, his rookie contract is up, is DeJuan Jones the answer at left tackle? Look, the answer at left tackle could be the 33rd overall pick, the first pick in the second round. That could be your left tackle.
So I guess the question is, there isn't the can't-miss quarterback. That doesn't mean that the quarterbacks at the top of the draft aren't talented. What becomes the determining factor? How do you decide, is it a quarterback at 2, or is it a guy that is like Abdul Carter, who people think is the next Micah Parsons? How do you weigh that if you're a GM?
Well, first of all, you have to get through free agency. And I think, again, this is just me speculating, you probably got to draft one and sign one. It goes without saying. You only have one quarterback in the building right now in DTR. So you have to find one, a veteran, call him a Bridge or whomever. I mean, look, they could go trade for Matthew Stafford. I think that's highly unlikely. But look, you go get a quarterback in the veteran free agent market, and then you sign one or draft one as well. The question is, do you draft one at 2? Do you draft one later down the line? I am always for the quote-unquote best player available. However, you've got to decide if you think one of these two is the future. Because the way to win in this league, go look at Washington. It's not the only way to win, but it certainly helps if you can win when you have a quarterback on an affordable rookie deal. When you have an older team and you've got to pay an older team, if you can find a really good quarterback and you could keep them for those 3 years on that rookie deal, or even 4, and win at a lower quarterback number, which is the opposite of what the Browns tried to do, obviously with Deshaun Watson, then, hey, you're onto something. But you can't take a quarterback just for the sake of taking a quarterback. You got to make sure you think that guy can actually be good.
Right, and who knows where that line is, because look at it this way. When you think of the cornerstones of the franchise, there's Myles Garrett, he was the 1st overall pick. Denzel Ward was the 4th overall pick. You got to get a guy like that at number 2, don't you?
You don't want, yes, you're picking 2nd, you gotta.
It's got to be a guy that's an all-pro.
You gotta hit, right? You're never gonna go out of business hitting doubles, right? But it would be great if you could hit a home run there, certainly. But go back to 2022, and I always use this one, and sometimes Browns fans, you might get mad at me for this one. In 2022, the Texans needed a quarterback. Davis Mills was their quarterback. They badly needed a quarterback. They didn't, and they were picking 3rd, just go, well, we need a quarterback. Kenny Pickett, because he's the only quarterback with a first-round grade, right?
Right.
Kenny Pickett, take him. No, they took Derek Stingley. That worked out great, and Kenny Pickett's holding the clipboard now on his 2nd team in Philadelphia, nowhere near taking the field anytime soon again. So they kept it in the fairway, and they got their quarterback the next year. Now, the Browns are different because they were a playoff team 2 years ago. They're not the Texans in 22, in which they needed 50 different positions. But there's an example of a team that's like, I don't know that quarterback there that everyone thinks is the first-round pick is going to be that good.
Right. And again, that makes it really difficult. I mean, really, Andrew Berry's got a tough job with that.
Look, I'd love to take a quarterback, but you got to be sure that quarterback's going to be good, not just a guy that's at the top of the draft, and therefore we got to take one.
As a guy that saw this team play every game as play-by-play voice, what areas of the roster do you think they're looking to upgrade?
I mean, it goes without saying, O-line, D-line. I'll take Howie Roseman a couple of minutes ago on the podium here. The Eagles general manager, Andrew Berry, obviously worked with him in Philadelphia. His brother is there with the Eagles as well in Philadelphia. He said he has an unhealthy obsession with drafting, scouting, O-line, and D-line. So I think, O-line, D-line, regardless of Miles' situation. You can never, ever, ever go wrong going there. And obviously with Elijah Moore as a free agent, You need another tight end as well. You got to add some weapons.
And
a running
back, yeah.
So and a running back. Although I'm team Jerome Ford here. I like Jerome a lot, but clearly, whether it's Nick Chubb coming back or they're going to draft a running back, they have to, in my opinion.
All right, before I let you go, and I kind of danced around it. When you look at that roster, isn't it closer to 500 than 3 wins?
That's.
I know you are what you are, but
that's the $280 million salary cap question.
Yeah.
That's the question.
Thoughts?
No, I do think they're closer to a playoff team than a 3-win team. Absolutely. But it's also an 8-8 league, or now we're a 7-9, 9-7 league.
Right.
Right. And look, it's been 35 consecutive years now, 35, in which at least 4 teams make the playoffs that didn't make it the previous season. 35 straight years. And like I said, in each of the last 2 seasons, the team that was picking second made the playoffs. The San Francisco 49ers are picking 11th this year. All right? They're better than what were they? A 4-win team? But they're not. Your record says you are. No one doubts that they can turn it around quickly. I think the Browns, I'm not just drinking the Kool-Aid, I think they can turn it around quickly too. You just have to have a great offseason.
Andrew Siciliano, thanks so much.
Hey,
appreciate the time. Thanks
yes,
very
sir.
much. Andrew Siciliano, he is the play-by-play voice of the Cleveland Browns on Browns Radio Network. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus. We continue with Cleveland's Sports4CLE from the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. Stay with us.
With the new Monopoly Bonus Spectacular family of scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery, you can uncover a spectacular amount of winnings. With 5 games from $1 to 20, multipliers from 5 times to 100 times, over $113 million in total cash prizes and chance bonuses. What you find under a greenhouse could change everything.
We continue with Sports4CLE's NFL Scouting Combine special from Indianapolis, Indiana on Radio Row. And we're pleased to be joined by Trevor Sikkema from PFF. Trevor, this for draft guys, this is a big day. You get to see the numbers and you get to hear some more from the individual prospects. Browns are looking for a quarterback.
Yeah.
When you look at number 2, does anybody intrigue you for the Browns at number 2 that plays quarterback?
Yeah. Cam Ward is the one who I am most intrigued by really of any of these quarterbacks in this class, but even specifically for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, when you're picking at number 2 overall, you need somebody that can give you a playoff caliber and even a Super Bowl ceiling. That's the way that I feel about it. I think Cam at least gives you that ceiling. I think that Shedeur plays a very I would say, like, clean brand of quarterback, but I just worry about, okay, is he ever going to be in that tier 2, tier 1 of quarterbacks at the NFL level? Does he really have that kind of overall, like, physical gifts to really be able to be that kind of a quarterback? Cam Ward, there are things you need to clean up, right? He's had a couple of games this past season where he dug his team a hole. I mean, he dug them out of it, but he was kind of sometimes the reason why they're there. But at least he gives you that gunslinger's mentality. I say this all the time. I think there's 2, 3, 4 throws that every quarterback has to make every single week to win a football game in the NFL. Cam shows you that he's never going to be afraid to make those throws. And I think that is the important part about drafting a quarterback in the top 3.
Do you have him as a first-round grade, high enough on the big board to take him as the number 2 overall?
I have a second-round grade on him. And, if I'm Cleveland, again, I think situation sort of goes into it. I would be taking one of Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, or I'd be really exploring a trade-down opportunity specifically for where this franchise is, right? I think the Deshaun Watson investment failed. And so you have to think about what the next phase of life is going to be, not just at the quarterback position, but your entire team. Because when they went in on a trade for Deshaun Watson, they very much did so thinking that the rest of the roster was ready for that kind of an investment, going out and getting a player like that, and hopefully making the playoffs and making a Super Bowl run. That didn't happen. So now you've got a situation where you've got expiring contracts, right, that you're going to have to address over the next couple of years. The offensive line, a lot of guys on the offensive line are either free agents this upcoming season or next season. And then, of course, there's the Myles Garrett component as well. If you're trading Myles Garrett, this is a multi-year rebuild at that point. And so if you're even entertaining that idea, and if that ends up happening, to me, there's no need to force a quarterback here at number 2 if you don't think that one is worth it. You might as well trade back or take a guy that you really think is worth it and get a good building block moving forward for whatever the next roster winning window is going to be for you.
Abdul Carter, do you see, it's a guy that's a little bit smaller than most edges,
sure,
but, only 1 year in Big Ten, and he kind of dominated.
No, he absolutely did. He reminds me of Micah Parsons, and I hate saying that because I think it's the easy comparison. Went to the same school, plays the same position, wears the same number, and so people go like, oh, of course, like, because you can't think of anybody else. No. It actually fits. The background does as well. Micah Parsons started off as an outside linebacker. He played some outside linebacker, some off-ball linebacker, I should say specifically, and then he moved at full-time edge work at the NFL level. Abdul Carter started as an off-ball linebacker, and then now he's a full-time edge, like you mentioned. This past year was his first year there, and he looked incredible. I mean, the build is very much the same. The explosiveness, their pass rush win percentage, all of that is incredibly high. So if you have an opportunity to get a player that's even close to a Micah Parsons, you have to consider them at number 2 overall.
Yeah, I guess the way I look at it, and it's from a Cleveland perspective, you have Denzel Ward and you have Myles Garrett. That was the first and the fourth pick in the draft.
Right.
You got to get a guy like that at 2.
100%. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to be able to get one anywhere else.
Right.
Like great pass rushers of that caliber don't hit the pro market. You don't really have, and I guess it's ironic that I say that because Myles Garrett is, but most of the time you never have an opportunity to get a player like that. You have to draft them. And so if you want edge rusher, especially again if you're trading Myles Garrett, the only time that you get a caliber player that is Abdul Carter is basically picking in the top 5.
So Browns also need running backs. This is a deep running back draft.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the third, fourth round range, who are some guys you think fit in that range with what the Browns need?
Yeah, I look at a guy like Dylan Sampson from the Tennessee Volunteers, who I think gives you a lot of speed. I think he's getting underrated in this class because there's a couple of guys that just, I don't know, have a little bit more height, maybe played at bigger programs, but, that's somebody that I think is fantastic. I think that he's got that home run ability to him. I think that he's, right there with some of the most impactful running backs that we saw in the college football season. I think 2 of the Ohio State guys as well, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, if they're there in the third round, I think Travion's probably raised his stock a little bit more. It feels like he's going to be more of a second-round pick, but, you could have a guy like Quinshon Judkins, fall into your lap in the third, fourth round, something like that. It's probably more the third now that we've seen that national championship run. But, man, it's just a handful of other players as well that that you can get and I think be pretty successful for you. Jaden Blue is a speedster from Texas who I think was really able to emerge this past season. You get even further down the line, you get a guy like, Jaquavius Marks who played at Mississippi State and then USC, or a Marcus Yarns who was at the Senior Bowl. He was somebody who played at Delaware and is a great receiving back. I wouldn't be worried about running back at all whatsoever. The question is, with running back for the Cleveland Browns, do you want to draft one at the top of the second round? Because if you don't, then there's plenty other guys that you can get a little bit later. But do you think a guy like a Caleb Johnson from Iowa or an Omarion Hampton, if he is there from North Carolina, do those guys intrigue you enough at the top of the second round to take one? Because if not, I do think there's going to be a lot of running backs to choose from later in the draft.
What about tackles? That's another one that kind of is kind of a need.
Yeah.
If DeJuan Jones is healthy and Conklin can play, there's a lot of ifs.
Yeah, and it goes back to sort of the conversation that you were having before, where if you want a starting caliber offensive tackle in this league, you basically have to draft one. Again, teams just don't let starting caliber offensive tackles hit the pro market, hit the trading block, anything like that. It's just very rare that that's the case. So, with them picking at number 2, there's not really an offensive tackle that you would think about there at number 2. But, the top of the second round, I think that there's a lot of guys that could potentially make it there. I look at a guy like Josh Simmons from Ohio State. He went through the knee injury, but, man, did he look good before he got hurt there. I think he's somebody that you'd factor in. The other Texas offensive tackle, Cam Williams, big dude, strong dude, moves super well, great length. Now, he needs a little polishing, right? I think that he needs to really fix things, especially a lot of the holding penalties that he had this past year. But he's somebody who's very intriguing. Maybe a Charles Grant, somebody who played at William and Mary, back-to-back FCS offensive tackle, or All-American offensive tackle, I should say. I think that he could put on a show here with how well he moves for a guy who's 6'5", 300 pounds. These are a couple of examples that players that, come to my mind. Ozzie Trapillo is somebody who, now that I'm thinking about it, I think he is just a steady Eddie offensive tackle where he might not be like a franchise caliber offensive tackle, but somebody that you put on the right side of the line of scrimmage and you really don't have to think too much about because he plays such a high floor brand of football. So those are a handful of names that I think about for the Browns.
The other one that I would say is a wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy had a real nice year. He's probably established himself as number one, but there's a lot of question marks behind that. Is there a guy that you can get in the third round that's kind of a playmaker?
Yeah, I like, for this team specifically, I like a guy like Alec Iomaner, and he is somebody from Stanford who I think he's a bigger, more X type of a wide receiver, but he's got a great track background to him, so he gives you a little bit more when it comes to that vertical ability. I like Charles Tillman and what he can be for the Cleveland Browns, but getting another big-bodied wide receiver I think makes a lot of sense for them. You get a couple of guys that are separation studs like Tez Johnson from Oregon, Xavier Estrepo from Miami, these players who are more slot-specific players. If you feel good about Jerry Jeudy being moved around the formation as more of that flanker type of outside receiver, then you could draft maybe somebody who's a little bit more of a slot stud for you. So there's all sorts of different shapes and sizes with wide receivers. Wide receiver is always decently deep every single year, and I think this year is another one.
Let's talk a little bit about Hunter, the guy that a lot of people have mocked to the Browns at number 2.
Mm-hmm.
The concern I have about him, and he's obviously a stud. He's a Heisman Trophy winner, but we get tweeners with guys that are safeties and linebackers. Does a team that's going to draft Travis Hunter have to have a definitive plan? Because you're asking him to be a cornerback and a wide receiver. That seems like a lot for anybody.
It does, and Mike Borgonzi, who's the new general manager of the Tennessee Titans, he was asked today at his podium about Travis Hunter. Certainly with them holding the number 1 overall pick, it makes sense that he's answering those questions. And he said, look, I think that there's a world where he could play both. And I wonder how many teams in the NFL would basically be saying, hey, we're going to let him play both until he proves to us that he can't. It's kind of like the offensive tackle, offensive guard thing. You go out, we'll let you fail at offensive tackle before we move you inside, but we're going to give you a shot to do it. If I was drafting Travis Hunter, I would be drafting him more along the lines of him being a full-time corner and then playing anywhere from 10 to 15 snaps at wide receiver every single week, because it is easier to tell a guy, hey, go out there and run a post route. Hey, go out there and just, make something happen. Like, you could do that at wide receiver, not to diminish the technical discipline that you need to have to be successful at the position, but I think that Travis Hunter already has that baseline. Corner is the one that you can't just throw him out there at corner. You got to have chemistry with the defense. You got to understand sort of what your assignments are and how they want you to play things. And so, to me, I'd be drafting him as a corner, but make no mistake, he's absolutely on the board for the Browns at number 2. I think he is the best player in this class.
Yeah, to your point about wide receiver, get the ball in his hands on little screens and see who can tackle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who can stay with him.
Not many could.
No, I agree. Trevor Sikkema, thanks so much. Appreciate you stopping by and joining us.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Trevor Sikkema, make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff, Pro Football Focus. He'll be having plenty of mock drafts, so make sure you check him out. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE from the Combine in Indianapolis, Indiana. We will see you again tomorrow, same time, same place, back here at the Combine for the NFL. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.